This part will deal with the morphology of the cerebral hemispheres. About the lobes of the cerebral hemisphere. We divide them into 4 lobes: a frontal, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. The landmarks we use are the central sulcus, which is almost midway between the frontal pole and the occipital pole, and the posterior branch of the lateral sulcus or lateral fissure. So the meeting of the central sulcus with the posterior branch of the lateral sulcus will mark the frontal lobe. A line from the extension of the posterior branch of lateral sulcus to meet a line between the parieto-occipital sulcus and the occipital notch along the inferior-lateral border will mark the other 3 lobes: the parietal, the temporal, and the occipital. That's how we mark or locate the lobes of the cerebral hemisphere. About the borders, there are 3 borders: supero-medial border and infero-medial border and inferior-lateral border. These are the 3 borders of the hemisphere. The inferior-lateral border, its anterior part is usually named the superciliary border, while the infero-medial border, its anterior part is usually named the medial orbital border, while its posterior part will be named the occipital border. Now, the surfaces of the cerebral hemispheres. Start with the superolateral surface. We have 3 surfaces: a superolateral, a medial, and inferior surface. What we are interested in these surfaces is to identify the main sulci and gyri of each surface and some of the functional areas which can be located at each surface. The main sulci or sulci on the superolateral surface are a superior and inferior frontal sulci, dividing the frontal lobe into superior, middle, and inferior frontal gyri. Then, along the parietal and part of the frontal, the central sulcus, anterior to it, the precentral gyrus, sulcus, and the post-central gyrus, and the post-central sulcus. So we have 3, the precentral sulcus, the central sulcus, the post-central sulcus, with two gyri, the precentral, which is the motor area, and the postcentral gyrus, which is the sensory area. In the temporal lobe, we have the superior, the middle temporal sulcus, and there is inferior temporal sulcus on the inferior surface. Dividing this temporal loop into superior, middle, and inferior temporal gyri. The posterior branch of the lateral sulcus, which separate between the frontal, the parietal, and the temporal lobe, have an angular gyrus along its posterior branch, the end of the posterior branch. At the occipital pole, there is what we call it the urinate sulcus, which mark the urinate gyrus. This is the limit of the visual area on the superolateral surface. These are the main sulci and gyri on the superolateral surface. Here, again the superolateral surface with some functional areas. As you mentioned, the precentral gyrus is the motor area of the whole body. The postcentral is the sensory area for the whole body. Here we have the posterior branch of the lateral sulcus, and this is the anterior branch here. This anterior branch is divided in anterior horizontal, this one here, marked by this line here, and anterior ascending. Around the anterior ascending, in the inferior frontal gyrus, this is the area of speech, which is found on the left side in the right-handed person, or the right side in the left-handed ones. The middle of the superior temporal gyrus is the auditory area. And as we said, the urinate gyrus will limit the visual area on this surface. These are some functional areas located at the superolateral surface. The body in the motor area, as well as in the sensory area, in the precentral gyrus, that is the motor area, where we are looking to a diagram to show that the body is upside down almost, the head at the lower part and the lower limb at the upper part and on the medial surface. The parts here are shown starting by the pharynx, and part of the intra-abdominal organs can precede the pharynx, or to start with at the most lower part. As it goes up, the parts of the head and neck will go to the parts of the upper limb, then the head and neck, the trunk, and lastly the lower limb. In that diagram here, it shows how it looks like the beginning, the tongue and the pharynx and the part going to the abdominal organs, then the head and neck, as we said, will be the trunk, and then the lower limb here. That is the representation in the precentral gyrus. The same thing will be in the sensory area. That is the medial surface of the cerebral hemispheres, which shows the corpus callosum, the head of the caudate, the fornix, the thalamus would be here. But most important are what we are looking for, the sulci and the gyri. Above the corpus callosum, we can see the callosal sulcus here. Parallel to it and above is the cingulate sulcus. Between both of them will be the cingulate gyrus. That is the central sulcus here. And this is the paracentral lobule. As we said, the area for lower limb, the motor area and the sensory area of the lower limb. This Y-shaped sulcus here is the calcarine sulcus or the anterior calcarine, and this is the posterior calcarine sulcus, and this is the parieto-occipital, which we have seen from the superolateral surface, marking the cuneus, the precuneus, and the lingual gyrus. In the floor of the calcarine sulcus and the posterior calcarine sulcus, including the lingual gyrus, in the visual area, which is limited by the ornate sulcus and the gyrus on the superolateral surface. Now, how it looks like the medial surface in a diagram. The cingulate gyrus, the cingulate sulcus, the callosal sulcus, the paracentral lobule, the precuneus, the cuneus, the anterior calcarine or calcarine, the posterior calcarine sulcus, and this is the lingual gyrus. That is the sulci and gyri on the medial surface. That's how it looks like the inferior surface, being divided into two areas: orbital surface and the tentorial surface, where the tentorium cerebrali will be separating the cerebellum from the occipital lobe. Clear here this H-shaped orbital sulcus and that olfactory sulcus which lodges the olfactory tract here. That's a diagram showing the sulci and gyri on the inferior surface. On the occipital, in the orbital surface, the H-shaped orbital sulcus is this one here, dividing this area into anterior, posterior, medial, and lateral orbital gyri. The olfactory sulcus will limit what we call the rectus gyrus. This is the rectus gyrus, and this is the olfactory sulcus, and this is the orbital sulcus. On the tentorial surface, we have what we call the rhinal sulcus, the parahippocampal sulcus, the collateral sulcus, and the inferior temporal sulcus. This will divide the gyri into the uncus, which overlap the midbrain as you can see here, the parahippocampal gyrus, the medial and the lateral occipitotemporal gyri, and the inferior temporal gyrus here, which is limited by the inferior temporal sulcus. These are the important sulci and gyri on the inferior surface.